that I get things kicked off while he finishes up a meeting. So I'll stand by for just a second. All right, we'll go ahead and get things kicked off. Natalie, if I could ask you to go ahead and do a roll call for us, that would be appreciated.
I will do that. Can everyone hear me?
Okay. Yes.
Okay, so we have Mark Bennett. He is going to be joining us later, I think. Representative Owens.
Yep, present.
Is here. Senator Haley. Senator Wilborn. Representative Finney.
Present.
Okay. Chief Ackerman.
Present, but I will be leaving at about 3 o'clock today. I can't stay the whole time.
Okay. Jennifer Basinger.
Present.
Judge Brown. Sheriff Carr. I think I saw him on here. Professor Francis. Chad Harmon. Spence Cohn.
Here.
Oh, there he is. Sorry. Judge Martin. Tabitha Owen. Sylvia Penner.
Present.
Bill Persinger.
Present.
Professor Phillips.
Present.
Pastor Roberson. Jennifer Roth.
Present.
Shelley Williams. I think she's going to be gone today. Okay, we have Attorney General Schmidt.
Jessica Domi on behalf of Attorney General Schmidt.
Okay. Scott Schultz.
Here.
Secretary Zamuda. And then staff, Connie Bonner. I think I see her. Okay. Robert Gallimore is here. Jordan is no longer our staff on here. Okay, Natalie Nelson, I am here. I have Malaysia Shagun. Don't see her. Jenna Moyer. Natalie Scott.
I'm here.
Jason Thompson.
Present.
And I think that's everybody.
Awesome. Natalie, can you confirm for the voting members that we have enough of a quorum? It seemed like there's a fair amount of absences today.
Yeah, I have 9 present out of 20. So I
All
guess
right,
that means,
Not quite there. I see Senator Haley just joined us.
okay, so then now we should have 10.
Well, then what we'll go ahead and do in hopes that we have one more join us, we'll just skip past the minutes that I was going to address since we're kind of at a 10 to 10 quorum at this point. We'll hold off on those, and then again, time permitting, we'll go back and we'll address that at a later time. That in mind, and I'm looking for the next item on the agenda. I was originally not going to be able to make this meeting, but when Chairman Bennett got stuck in a court situation, I was able to step out of my meeting. So what is next on the agenda?
Subcommittee reports.
Very good. Thank you for that. While we move into those subcommittee reports, we'll see if I can't find that agenda and make sure we move forward. What is the first subcommittee listed?
This is Natalie Nelson, KLRD. We didn't really have an order, so I guess it's just up to whoever wants to go first.
Excellent. Do we have any volunteers? As you guys can see, I'm kind of walking around a conference room trying to sort this out as I go along. So,
Acting Chairman,
yes.
I could report for the Diversion Subcommittee.
Very good. Go right ahead. Thank you very much.
So it's a talented group of individuals. We've added a couple of people as advisory members, and 2 basic general areas we're looking at are some of the legal issues, which I don't pretend to understand. I've taken copious notes and read them, and they make a little more sense to me, but thank goodness we've got some great legal minds on that subcommittee. But, talking about things like pretrial and, kind of uniform reporting and the privacy of those records. And of course, we all, I think, agree on 2 things, and members are free to speak up and say, Bill, that's not quite right, or to add to this report, by the way. But, we all want public safety, number 1, in mind. And number 2, if there's a way to productively and safely keep people out of jail or get them out of jail, we want to do that. But again, that overriding the big circle would be public safety. And, a piece of that would be, what can we do to move people into recovery or other forms of, rehabilitation that will be more productive for them and society. And so those are kind of the 2 areas we're working on, trying to learn more about actual diversion programs. What are they doing here? What are they doing there? And have brought in a couple of experts in that arena. We recognize there would be differences across the state. And so we are always keeping in mind that principle of scalability to a smaller, medium-sized, or larger populated region. With that, Acting Chairman, I conclude my report and invite members of the committee to add or correct items.
Very good. Thank you very much, Bill. Anybody care to add to that report from the subcommittee? All right. Well, with that in mind, then we can move on to, let's see, there are a number of subcommittees dealing with probation, but let's look at the proportionality sentencing subcommittee. Do we have somebody that could give us a report on that?
Yes, we met actually this morning, and we had 2 different topics we looked at. The short order one would be the border box. It actually is going back to the legislature after talking to Scott Schultz anyway. And the only reason it wasn't approved with the other one, so we're told, is because basically ran out of time. So we didn't spend any time on that. The biggest time we spent on was CORA, the Registration Act. And we kind of we're on the fence. We have opposition from both sides, kind of what they would like to see taken out of CORA. And of course, as law enforcement, there's things we don't want taken out of CORA. And so what we decided, Bill Carr, being the sheriff, they deal with a lot of the registrations anyway, the Sheriff's Association does. And Jennifer Roth has a bunch of ideas on her side that to delete or lessen some of the Cora obligations. So they're going to put a list together for our next meeting on the 30th, so we can hopefully get that hashed out to where it's something that's we may not all agree, but acceptable to bring back to the committee. We spent an hour on it and barely scratched the surface, I think, with what acceptable recommendations would be, I think, for both sides. So, and those are the only two topics we covered. Everything else is back in the report that wasn't approved anyway. So that's where we stand on that. Unless I was wrong, I'd invite Jennifer or Bill to correct me on anything if I was wrong on that.
Sounds good. Jennifer?
Right.
Okay, sounds
All
good.
right. Well, thank you very much, Chief Ackerman, for that. Go ahead and I know we're in a process. We're very early in these subcommittee meetings, so there may be limited amounts to report. As you mentioned, there's a lot of people debating a lot of different things and a lot of different ideas. So I really appreciate your guys' work. Spence Cohen, I believe you may even have more than one report to report for us today.
Yes, so what I'll just take over for a little bit here. I'll start with the committee it's the research-based incentives. I'd just like to call it the incentive subcommittee. We really, at this last meeting, we met on the 5th. We've added several members, the president of the Kansas Association of Court Services Officers, the Kansas Community Corrections Officers Association. We got Jennifer Roth, who is on this meeting, to join in with us as well. And I've reached out to Tabitha to see if she'll participate from a perspective of a county or a district attorney. But we kind of focused a lot of attention at this last meeting on the current legislation, reviewed what that is, as there is, for the people that aren't aware, there's legislation currently pending, and it states basically to give a 50% review hearing for all offenders, as well as a 7-day credit for each 30 days of substantial compliance. As a group, we really decided to focus solely on strengthening the incentive portion of this legislation and make recommendations around that, as we feel that that'd be the most appropriate movement forward with that. We talked a little bit about average lengths of probation across the country, which is 3 years versus Kansas. It's currently 12 months is the average length of probation in Kansas. So how does the research talk about what is best practices and looking at our shortened probation periods? At our next meeting, Council of State Governments is going to report a little bit on what incentives have worked well in other states, as well as those that have not shown any impact. So that's kind of where we're at this point with that subcommittee. And our next meeting will be September 7th or 2nd, I'm sorry, at 9 o'clock. So I guess I'll pause for any questions based on the incentives subcommittee.
Any questions or comments for the incentive subcommittee?
Acting Chairman,
Yes.
real quick note, I didn't mean by my short report to indicate that we hadn't talked about quite a few details. We really have, and a couple of really vibrant meetings. And in fact, we were going to meet monthly and decided to throw in a couple of extra meetings. So we met last week, going to meet next week. So a lot of work being done. I did not mean to convey to that and by the brevity of my report.
No, I completely understand that from everybody.
Thank you.
I anticipated this to be a bit of a shorter meeting to begin with, because decisions aren't being made at this point. Discussions are happening. And that's why we have subcommittees, is so that we don't all have to be engaged in hours of conversation, but that we report decision and or progress being made. So that is not a problem whatsoever. I appreciate that clarity. Spence, we'll
Thank you,
go ahead and
Chairman.
turn it back over to you.
Yeah, and for all the people that have been in committees with me, you know, I can certainly talk longer if you want me to say a lot more. But Shelley Williams is currently, she was for the standardization of terms and conditions of community supervision. She is out today at a conference, so I'm gonna fill in for her as well. We had our first meeting on August 5th with this committee. This committee will also be adding members of other stakeholders, a lot like what I mentioned just a little bit ago, to make sure we're well-rounded and make sure we have buy-in by all stakeholders. The subcommittee really reviewed this last meeting, the notes and what was taking place last year, reviewed examples of conditions of probation from across the state, which included 66 different conditions of supervision from court services and community corrections and parole, reviewed what best practices standards were and what Kansas did and did not have in current statute, reviewed that there's no standardized format across the state and no specific conditions that are consistent across the state. Council of State Governments noted that there was no one document, again, on the standardization on what best practice conditions of supervision are. So the Council of State Governments also talked about or informed the subcommittee that if a condition is not going to be enforced and not related to reoffending or the success on supervision, then it probably should not be included. So we'll as we move forward, we'll look at that. The subcommittee via consensus agreed changes need to be made to just gain more consistency across the state. And then at the next meeting, the goal is to focus on narrowing or streamlining the number of general conditions of supervision that are ordered. And then we're going to be focusing kind of on a standard form using the 31st District's probation order currently as a template. So that's where that committee is at currently. So I'll stand for questions.
All right, anybody have any questions for Spence on that subcommittee report? I know Spence has definitely done a great job leading the charge in many of these instances and now filling in for many of us that aren't able to be here. So know that it's appreciated as we turn the time back over to you for one more, I believe.
Yeah, so and I will readily admit the next report won't be quite as thorough because I didn't take, I will be honest, as good of notes because I wasn't thinking I would be covering this one. So forgive me if it's short, but you can help me as well, Representative Owens. So on the dual supervision committee, this committee is really focusing on the cases, just to be clear, that are supervised by more than one entity and who should be the supervision entity when that occurs. So if you have someone, say in Franklin County, that's placed on community corrections, and then someone that's also placed on court services during that same time, who should be the entity that's supervising that individual? So this group really reviewed once again assessments in Kansas and looked at risk, trying to determine what agency should be the supervision entity when there are dual supervision cases. Should it be assigned by risk? Should it be assigned by sentence length? Council of State Governments reported to us that Ohio, when they did their dual supervision, looked at that they assigned the case to whoever has the longest potential prison sentence. And so there was a lot of discussion about that. If Kansas were to follow this example, discussion was held on maybe we have to look at exceptions to this. For instance, if a individual has a 15-month DOC sentence, but is only on probation for 2 months with community corrections and then picks up a 12-month probation with court services, does it make sense that case be transferred as well? So that's something we talked about, making exceptions for certain individuals in certain cases if in order to keep the most consistency for offenders moving forward. We want to make sure the success is as high as we can make it. So we also discussed if this is something, as we move forward, is this something that we need to have actual legislation on, or maybe if it's more of a policy that's created on transferring cases and how that works. So I think as we move forward, this group's going to continue to look at the challenges in implementing and then what additional data we might be able to gather that can help drive these decisions. So that's my report on that. And anybody else on this committee, feel free to add or refute anything I had to say.
I think you were spot on. From my recollection, and I had to get off that one early as well. You covered it very adequately, the dual supervision rule. So I think you're good. Any questions for Spence at this point? All right. Thank you very much again, Spence, for all your work on those committees. What other committees do we need to hear a report from today?
Hi, this is Natalie Nelson from Legislative Research. I think the only one we have left is the race in the criminal justice system, which is chaired by Chairman Bennett. So I think we just would need to wait on him.
All right. Yeah, I have not seen Chairman Bennett get online at this point.
I will say that we do have a quorum now. We have some more people that joined. So if you wanted to approve minutes now.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Natalie. Again, I appreciate you keeping us straight here. Let's take a look. I believe everybody was sent out with the announcement of this meeting minutes. See for the June 28th and the July 19th minutes. If everyone has had the opportunity to review those, I would certainly entertain a motion for their approval.
Acting Chairman, Bill Persinger, I'll make a motion to approve both sets, the June and July.
I got a correction yet.
Okay, go right ahead.
I'll withdraw the motion.
I'm sorry,
Sure.
the only correction that I have is for the June 19th was Nelson Mosley. It has him as an ad hoc member added on to the Proportionality Committee when he was actually added to the Rates in the Criminal Justice System Committee as an ad hoc member.
All right. Does anybody have any objection to that correction or concern otherwise? If not, are there any other corrections that we need to address before we entertain a motion?
This is Sheriff Parr. I don't see in the minutes where it reflects me being put on the diversion subcommittee.
Sheriff, we may have done that after. I don't recollect.
Should have been in the July minutes, I believe.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, Bill, there was actually two corrections we made. There was two people appointed to that. I remember what you're talking about.
And maybe one removed. That is true. I
Yeah.
thought that was handled outside the meeting. My apologies.
All right, so we need to correct the minutes to reflect Sheriff Carr and who else? Does anybody else recall the other addition that needed added?
Natalie, would you have that list?
Let me check here, my notes.
I mean, I have a list of who's on there. I'm just not sure which meeting we took that action. So it probably is good to get that clarified. And I'm sorry for that lack of detail.
There we go.
Okay,
July
Bill.
19th. So on the diversion, should have Professor Phillips, Mark Bennett, Bill Persinger, Chad Harmon, AG Jessica Domi, Tabitha Owen, Spence Cohen, and Sheriff Carr.
The only thing I would add is we have Letitia Furwalt as a ad hoc member as well.
And we added her out after that meeting, but
Yeah.
that list that Sheriff Carr just read is correct. And
Gotcha. Okay.
This Chief Ackerman, I found two more. I don't know if it's already in there. It's Jonathan Ogletree from the Kansas Prison Review Board was listed as ad hoc to the race, and a Curtis Barnes from Johnson County pretrial. This was an email sent out by Jordan on the 19th of July. Those are extra additions after the fact as well.
yeah, and you know what? And those appointments that happened after that meeting, the ad hoc, or I use the word advisory, I guess that would show up in the detail of today's minutes as well, and be memorialized that way.
Correct. Yeah, anything added after the minutes, we're specifically trying to make sure that we have the minutes correct from those two meetings.
Exactly.
And that is also why we have these discussions and we review these things, because occasionally things are left out. So is there anything else in the minutes for those two meetings that we need to address? If not, then I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes as amended.
I'll go ahead and make that motion again, Mr. Chairman. It's Bill Persinger from Topeka.
Thank you, Bill.
Second it. Todd
Second.
Ackerman.
Chief Ackerman, thank you very much. We'll just go with, is there anybody opposed to approving those minutes? If not, we'll use their silence as acclamation. All right, so moved.
Chairman?
Yes.
Sorry. I don't recall, I could list members of the diversion committee specifically for these minutes. I might have one other name that we've added as ad hoc.
If Natalie would like for you to read that and review that to make sure that her notes are correct, that would be perfectly fine.
This is Natalie. Yeah, that would be great.
Super. And so I'll just go to my email group here. Bill Carr, myself, Bill Persinger, Chad Harmon, Gene Phillips, Jessica Domey, Letitia Furwalt, that's Ferwalt, Mark Bennett, Rustin Martin, Judge Rustin Martin from Comanche County, Spence Cohen, and Tabitha Owen. And we have been supported by staff, if I got this right, Natalie Nelson and Stephanie Duries. Hope I didn't leave anybody out because they've all worked very hard, Chairman.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. Looking through things, it appears that our chairman has been able to join us. So with that in mind, Mr. Chairman, we have went through subcommittee reports and heard from our subcommittees. We've also reviewed, amended, and approved the minutes. And so with that in mind, I will turn the time over to you for any further discussion and or adjournment.
Okay. You say you did go through the subcommittee reports?
We did, yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Well, first of all, I apologize to everybody. I had a meeting with a victim that on a really tragic case, multiple fatalities, and thought it would be most of it. I just needed to give the family the time they needed, and so didn't give myself as much time as I should have. So I apologize for being late. So I'm late entry here today. Were there any questions or any other comments that anyone needed to make about the subcommittees? Are we making the progress we need to in this with the time given? Does anybody need anything else that we can try to do or seek approval for in terms of funding, et cetera, to further the cause or further the work of any of the subcommittees? If so, speak up. I think I can see most everybody, but maybe not everybody.
Mr. Chairman, this is Spence Cohen.
I'll defer to Spence.
Go ahead, Spence.
Just a quick question as we move forward, looking at timelines. Do we have a preliminary timeline when we want our final reports from the subcommittees given to I don't know if we go to the full commission to put together the full report. I'm just thinking about as we move forward, we're already into September coming up, and how many more meetings, you know, each individual committee might need to make in order to make this a full report.
Well, so it's kind of a loaded question, but a good question. The issue as I see it is we have a deadline. Let's work our way backwards. We have a deadline of December 1st or the first week of December. If we continue to meet once a month, we'll need these things really fairly quick. I mean, September is kind of the time to hone in, October finalize, November, we better have it so that we can then discuss it as a larger group here and give the folks time necessary to put the final report together at the end of November, coming out of Thanksgiving week, and get it to the legislature. The reality is because we have had a year and a half, almost 2 years worth of work, that's come before us. And what we're really doing is kind of honing in again, and maybe in some cases just restating and re-urging what we want the legislature to take up. They didn't give us a lot of time this time, but at the same time, I don't know that we need as much time as we have in the past. So my answer to your question is I'll put it out this way, kind of put it back to the subcommittees. If you need more time, I can't get you more time, but what you can do is have more meetings. So I know in diversion bills asked for a second meeting, a second meeting in August, maybe a couple in September, and just meet more often in those subcommittees. There's nothing that stops that as long as we kind of keep track of the overall tally because we did get a certain number approved. I'll ask Natalie Nelson here in a minute to tell us kind of how many we've got to work with, if she's keeping track of that. But you can have more meetings per month to help you hone in on what you need. But I would say, at least in keeping with what we've done in the past, if we can get final reports to the Reform Commission by the end of October, so that we can then meet at least once, if not twice, in November, and still give the folks at the legislature time to put the final report together, I think that at least is in keeping with what we've done in the past. Natalie Scott, Natalie Nelson, any of you folks have anything to add to that? Does that seem like a fair timeline for you all?
This is Natalie from Legislative Research. So by my count, we have, this is our second meeting that we've used for the full commission. So we have 4 left. And then we have, we had 18 sort of set aside for subcommittees, and we've used 2 so far. So we have 16 left of those. So you could always, I think you could rearrange and use those for full commission or however you want to do it. But I'm trying to think what November, mid-November for our date of December 1st would probably be our goal.
So
report out.
To your point, let's use the commission itself. If we have 4 left, it's September, October, and then 2 in November. That would be a simple way to do it. I'm not married to that. We could do September 1 in early October, 1 in late October, and then the second, the final one in early November. We'll have to check people's schedules and see what works for everyone. But I think the way we did it last couple of years was 2 in November, 1 in September, 1 in October, 2 in November, and that was the way it worked for us. Having 16 left out of the 18 for the subcommittees, frankly, gives us quite a bit of wiggle room there. And frankly, if we get low, the first week or 2 when we were doing subcommittees, some of us did them on our own. So like, for instance, I did the diversion subcommittee and the race and the criminal justice system subcommittee, had the public meeting room be one in Sedgwick County, and then ran the Zoom out of here. Those are not part of the 18. Is that correct, Natalie Nelson? I don't want to misstate that, but I believe that's separate and apart from, yes?
Yes. So I was counting. So we had 1 consolidation subcommittee that was through the public meeting room was in the State House. And then the upcoming criminal race and criminal justice system is also set for the State House. So those other subcommittees that have already met off-site, those are not being counted towards that 18.
So I guess my point is we've got some play in this if it comes to it. So does that answer your question, Spence? You're off.
Yes, just to be clear. So we're just basically looking the end of October to have our subcommittee reports submitted to the full commission.
That would be, I think that would be a good goal to shoot for. Now, I will say if you have something done sooner, there's nothing that says you can't submit it sooner, but yes, having it done at least by end of October would be good.
Thank you.
Questions on that point, and then Bill, I'll turn it to you because I know you had a question earlier.
Thanks, Chairman. I had Bill Persinger, Topeka. I had the same question that Spence did, and I just would add that I think we've had 3 meetings of the diversion subcommittee. Each has had a public room designated, and I want to just put that down for the record. So appreciate the work being done there.
Okay. These are good questions to help us hone in on what we're doing. Any other questions related to subcommittee work, things that we need to complete our relative respective tasks? Any other comments before we wrap this up?
Chairman, just a technical question.
Sure.
Bill Persinger, Topeka. And maybe this is more a question for KLRD staff to advise. If I'm sitting at my computer and I have a question about, hey, Spence, would you write a paragraph about this and send it to me? Is that kind of communication permitted under the open records? If we're trying just to maybe put together a report, put together some minutes, that kind of person-to-person communication or a phone call or text?
This is Natalie Nelson from Legislative Research. I could also defer to Natalie Scott from Revisor's Office, since they do open meetings and open records issues more frequently. But it is my understanding that as long as that communication is occurring between a minority of the subcommittee members, right, that doesn't run afoul of COMA or CORA.
So as long as we don't have a quorum present.
And I think there's one other,
hearing that right?
One other thing to remember, yes, but also what is the substance of the discussion? If you're simply saying, hey, Spence, I'll cover the first paragraph, would you look at this for me? You're not voting on anything. You're not taking any steps toward furthering the act, or excuse me, furthering the business of the task force, the commission. You're not voting on anything. It's simply the ministerial thing you're asking somebody to do. My point is, even you could even do that if 4 or 5 people were involved, I think.
Oh, okay.
When you start to vote, it's when you start to take substantive action on something substantive that is the subject matter of the commission that you get in trouble. What you're talking about is, I'd like, would you review this for typos? You've got that paragraph, could you send that to me? These are not things we're going to vote on. This is an administrative task. Natalie Scott, any disagreement with that statement?
No, Mr. Chairman, I think that's accurate. Things that aren't the subject matter of the commission, you don't have to worry as much about COMA violations, but I would remind you guys about serial communications. That's something that we see sometimes. So if one of you talks to, committee member number 2, who then relays that information to committee member number 3, 4, so on and so forth, then you would run into issues. So making sure that you're not replying all the emails or having those serial communications will make sure that you don't violate COMA.
Okay, good question.
Thank you. That helps.
Did I hear someone else piping in before Bill did? Was there another
Chairman,
question?
Jessica Domi, Attorney General's Office.
Yes.
I'm sorry, but before you were able to join the meeting, we had deferred the Race and Criminal Justice Subcommittee report until you joined. And I don't recall hearing that. I just didn't want to call you out, but I did know that we had not heard an update on that issue.
Okay, I didn't know that. Thank you. So, we'll get to that here momentarily. Was there anything else though before? Okay, so the update on the race and the criminal justice system, we met on the 15th. I think we're set to meet again on the 19th, which is Thursday, as I recall. We discussed membership, and that was one of the, I think I did hear, just as I was able to join the meeting, a discussion about minutes. Jonathan Ogletree from the Prisoner Review Board was added. I think other folks have already been discussed. Nelson Mosley, Curtis Barnes from Johnson County. And so we discussed certain things. Let me grab this real quick. One of the things we talked about was just identifying some of the high points from last year's discussion, things that we wanted to make sure didn't get lost in this year's discussion. And so, for instance, what we're going to discuss this next Thursday are issues related to like law enforcement training. I assume people know, but there's 3 primary locations that law enforcement officers in the state of Kansas get their training that leads to their certification. KLETC, which is Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center in Yoder, Kansas, which is where most law enforcement agents in the state go to get trained. And then Sedgwick County has a standalone training center at Wichita State for the sheriff and the Wichita Police Department. And then I believe Johnson County has one likewise for their law enforcement agents. And so the question would be, is there training, de-escalation, things like that could be made a part of the ongoing training and continuing ed regimen that law enforcement officers have to go through? So training, law enforcement training was one topic. A second one would be standardization of law enforcement policies. Seems self-evident, but not all agencies may have the exact same policies with respect to different specific issues. And so the degree to which that can be accomplished was a topic of discussion. Legislation regarding the gang designation. You may or may not know it, but being a gang member is a term of art that is defined by the legislature. KSA 216313, 6316 are the operative statutes. So we discussed that and whether those could be addressed or whether it needs to be amended, changed. But that was a topic of discussion. Traffic offenses, it seems like a fairly mundane topic for something as heavy as race in the criminal justice system, but traffic is the contact point for a whole lot of folks, and not the least of which are our minority populations. And so the degree to which the traffic code can be a source of improvement and the degree to which it's a source of a problem right now and then needs to be improved upon. Just that general topic was brought up and discussed. I got 3 more to go. We had a pretty lively discussion that day. Next would be the data collection regarding race, ethnicity, and the degree to which the race of an individual is noted or made note of in police reports or in reports memorializing that contact. Is that something that's done? Is it done consistently? Because later on, as we've all learned, when we want to data mine information, the more data entry that is required at the back end, the more difficult that process becomes. So if you put it on the front end that there's a box to check or something very simple to do, then the people later on trying to figure out, cull information out of it have a much simpler task. What would this be? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, sixth was the co-responder programs. We've heard a lot about those in different jurisdictions in Wichita or Sedgwick County, as well as Shawnee County, I know, and there may be others, have begun what they call co-responder programs, which may mean different things in different jurisdictions, but fundamentally the concept is when law enforcement gets called out to a particular scene, depending on either the nature of the call or the history of the caller or the subject of the call, law enforcement may either not go, or if they do go, they go with a mental health professional or a social worker. So if it's a type of call where it's somebody who's just acting out of, in a crazy type of manner, as it's being described by the caller, rather than sending 5 or 6 cops out there with guns, maybe they send a social worker along to try to talk the person down. Maybe it's a mental health issue. Or if they go they're called to a house where there's an individual with long-standing mental health issues that are already known to law enforcement. Those are the kind of things that would trigger that. And how is that utilized? How has it been successful? Are there any recommendations that could be made from this subcommittee to the commission, and then ultimately to the legislature to enhance or to further that effort? And then finally, something actually I brought up was a recent bill that was believe, passed just in the last 90 days, last 4 or 5 months, maybe, in Missouri. For anybody keeping score here, it's Senate Bill 53 from the 2021 session, excuse me, of the Missouri Legislature. And it's a kind of an omnibus bill. There's about 20 things listed in there. The one, it's, I don't know, it's halfway down, 3/4 of the way down. It's called Section 547.031. Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, but that's what their legislature designates it as. And what it does is it gives prosecutors in their state now the opportunity to bring to the court's attention information that they think has come to their, say that again, to bring it to the court when they believe they have been provided evidence of either actual innocence or evidence that would suggest there's a problem with a conviction, and which seems fairly obvious and fairly normal. You know, you just do it, you bring it to the court's attention. But without a mechanism to do it, the court in many instances has no jurisdiction over cases, especially ones that are on appeal, etc. And so it gave prosecutors in Missouri the opportunity, when the defense attorneys, Innocence Project, whomever may have brought something to their attention, to go, you're right, we've got a problem with this historic case. We need to bring it to the court's attention. And it gave a pathway that didn't exist before, that might have been a procedural bar otherwise. So it's something I brought up because I've talked to my colleagues in prosecution, and we've all said if ever faced with a situation like that, obviously we wouldn't object, but not objecting to a jurisdiction-less motion is one thing. It would be far more easy or far better to have an absolute pathway to success jurisdictionally. So those are the things we discussed, and we're going to bring those up again on the agenda at the next meeting on Thursday. So sorry to take up so much time, but there was a lot covered in a short amount of time at that last meeting. Any discussion, or anybody who was part of that race in the criminal justice system meeting who wants to add anything to that? Okay. I will ask one question. I know in the agenda for today, we had set aside time for the Bureau of Justice Assistance subaward options, and Steve was rattling off the things you guys had accomplished before I got on the call. Was that already addressed?
Afternoon, Mr. Chairman. This is Stephanie with CSG Justice Center. It was not addressed, but I did want to give an update to the Reform Commission that we're going to postpone that discussion, and I wanted to give a couple of reasons why. The work that the subcommittees are doing is quite impressive, to be honest with you. The conversations that are taking place are extensive, they're far-reaching. We are working, in fact, with the Sentencing Commission to see if they can run some additional data for one of the subcommittees. So I think at this point, we would like to see how things unfold a little bit more before we dive too much into how we can spend that $500,000 subaward to support the work of the Reform Commission and Kansas in general. We definitely have some ideas that we've talked through with community corrections representatives, KDOC, as well as OJA. So there's a lot on the table there that we can pick from. I also wanted to let the Reform Commission know that some of those funds may possibly also be eligible to be used to address behavioral health needs in the state from the Reform Commission's last report, and some of the recommendations there that may impact, for instance, KDADs. So there's a lot moving around right now, so I think it is actually best if we postpone that conversation, but there's a lot more to come. Folks should definitely be on the lookout for meetings to pop onto calendars, or meeting requests, I should say, to pop onto calendars to talk through some of those options more in depth to make sure that we can support you guys the best way we can.
That's great. I have a question and a comment. Question is 15 minutes that we allotted for this for today, will that be enough, do you think? And obviously it may change as more information comes in, but do you think 15 minutes will be enough to set aside?
Chairman, that's a great question. I think that in the September meeting, we would probably want about 30 minutes if possible. We can definitely slim that down if things are coming up. But I think it would be nice to walk through over the next month what we've come together with on the different subcommittees and with the different agencies in the state, so that we can just make sure that the full commission is aware of how that money is planning to be spent, or I should say the application submitted for the money to be spent.
It's not a problem, just as long as we know in advance. And that was the second thing you mentioned, September. My only, I mean, we'll make time whenever we can, but I would urge you to try to have it by September at the latest October, only because these funds and the manner in which they might be available to us might inform some of the subsequent discussions in the final report that I think we're going to be hashing out pretty hard and heavy in November. So, okay.
Absolutely. In total agreement there.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, so as to today, and again, I'm with my apologies for getting on late. We had the approval of the minutes. Looks like we started with subcommittee reports, and it sounds like with the Race and Justice System Subcommittee, we've now heard from everybody. I'm sure somebody will tell me if I'm mistaken about that, but I think we've heard from all the subcommittees. We've had the approval of the June 28th and July 19th minutes. We have gotten the update on the BOJ subawards that is going to be postponed 1 month at least. And then the last thing I've got is an adjournment, and we are clipping right along here. We're an hour ahead of time, so we can just kill time and talk all you want, I suppose. But
Chairman?
Yeah, Bill.
Hey, promise not to kill more than 30 seconds. If
Perfect.
it's appropriate, back on the discussion about co-responder, I believe you're considering that within the race and social justice.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah, pardon me. I would make myself or any of my staff at Vallejo Behavioral Healthcare here in Topeka available to the subcommittee if you want more information in one of your public meetings about co-responder here in Shawnee County. Our experience, cost, function, operations, that kind of thing. So we just offer that up.
I appreciate that, and I certainly wouldn't turn you down, I guess. And anybody who needs to hear that, let us know. We can make that available. I'm going to make a leap of faith here and answer that offer with this. I think everybody who's heard about it and is aware of that concept is pretty taken with it, because so far as I can tell, at least in Sedgwick County and in Shawnee County and other places that have tried it, it's been met with success. Now, define that how you want, but it's been a successful effort. The question really for me is what this commission can do. The power we have is both in our charge from the legislature, but also in this report. We are not going to get everything done that we want to, but we are laying a foundation for this legislature in the 2022 session and future legislatures to come back and say, what did that Reform Commission recommend? What issues were brought up? And there are several legislators on here who can, and people, frankly, who have done a lot of work with the legislature over the years. Mr. Schultz, I see on here, testifies routinely up there, and so my suggestion is going to be, if we need information, great, let's have it. But my thought would be, I'd be more interested in knowing, okay, what would you like to see in terms of legislation? What would a bill that could enhance this, either enhance what you have in Shawnee County, or would be the framework for a bill that would be the framework for it being rolled out in other jurisdictions? What changes to the law? What can we do to tell the legislature this is something substantive you can do as a body, for the legislators to enhance this in other counties, other regions, other parts of the state? I just think that's going to be the most specific use of time. Coming in with a good idea is one thing. Coming in with a good idea that's attached to a specific draft, at least even draft language for a piece of legislation, helps people like Natalie Scott come in and go, okay, I know what you need, and come up with a bill that can then be, get a champion through one of the committees at the legislature. So that's my 2 cents. I'd be happy to hear from anyone else though on that idea.
Mr. Chairman?
Sir.
Hello?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman Bennett, I don't know, this is Haley. I don't know if you can hear me. I've been raising my hand. I tried to get in right after the report. Really appreciate it. And you're right on target. I've introduced a bill for many years on data collection. So your subcommittee there just is exciting to hear this full committee undertake it. I was wondering if added to the data collection might be the consideration, not just of race, but the preliminary of gender and even county of origin. It seems as if there have been, in some instances, of profiling by an individual or even by an entire agency, that gender and often looking at where the state and county of origin are, especially for traffic stops, are important. And I would just ask that your subcommittee please consider those. I've introduced a bill time and again for data collection to have this on the front end, because as you mentioned, that data is already available on the back end. But by then, a lot of damage has been done, especially when we don't have any measures of pretrial detention, bond hearings, what have you. So I just wanted to throw that out if I could. The other thing is thank you for letting me know about Missouri Senate Bill 53. I collaborate a lot with the colleagues since I'm in the Kansas City area. And we have something called the Conviction Integrity Unit that our DA, Mark Dupree, put in place. Of course, that too is on the back end. It'd be great to have that exculpatory evidence available that prosecutors could consider on the front end. So I just want to throw that out and say it's been a very exciting and provocative meeting here today. And I thank you for letting me just throw those two considerations out. Also wanted to, if I could, take a personal privilege and wish our committee member, happy birthday, Representative Gail Finney. I believe today is her birthday. Thank you, sir.
Long as you don't ask us to sing, you can do it all day. You can.
Thank
you, David. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Finney, thank you I hope you have a happy birthday today.
Thank you.
Very good. And Mark or David, I'm sorry, I didn't see you waving. I've got about half a dozen little screens up there, and I didn't see you, so I apologize for missing you earlier.
Oh, no problem at all. Hey, I'm in the Kansas Legislature. I'm accustomed to being overlooked.
Understand. All right.
Chairman, I think you're muted somehow now.
Sorry, I don't know how I did that. Thank you for pointing that out. Just see my mouth moving, and so what I was going to say is that, well, we've got a little bit of time here before we wrap this up. Are there any other comments? Anything else anyone wants to bring to anyone's attention before we close today? Just any other comments you wanted to make sure we considered before we close it out.
Mr. Chair, this is Scott.
Yes, Schultz, go ahead.
We do have, as far as I was going to let the Subcommittee on Race and Criminal Justice know that I will have at least one, if not two, research staff at that meeting on Thursday. So if there are things that you're looking at as far as demographic information, as far as race, gender, county of origin, those type of things, please let us know. You can just email me and I'll pass that along. But at least one, if not two, of our staff will be there to assist the subcommittee.
I think sometimes what's helpful in these discussions is just clarifying what is available already. Because I think sometimes we don't maybe know the degree to which there is information, who holds it or who has it, how do they get it, and what might be needed to have more robust information. So I think on that discussion, I'd want to start there because sometimes we find out that we actually have more access to things than we thought we did, but maybe not everything we want. And the way to tweak it is by just adding a couple of boxes here or there rather than creating something from whole cloth, because you start talking about a new repository and we need to create a new place to store stuff. It gets costly and it gets shot down quickly. If we can just add to what we already have, you're more likely to see success. So, all right, very good. Thank you, Scott. Any questions for Mr. Schultz before he move on?
No questions. Again, Mr. Chair, I should mention though, Missouri has had data collection, extensive data collection for many years. It's been able to point out the pockets where problems exist across the state of Missouri. And they've had multiple categories, not just race, gender, or county of origin. And the red herring of was too costly has been refuted, and they've worked through that difference. And it's worked very well, I think, for transparency in problem areas.
Very good. Okay. Anything else that anyone else bring to the group's attention before we wrap it up? All right. Well, I appreciate everybody's time. It's now 3 o'clock. Looks like we've got quite a bit of work done in a short amount of time today. So we'll wrap up the meeting. I know the race in the justice system meeting is again Thursday. There are other subcommittees that I've been getting updates from in terms of when meetings are going to be held. And I will make sure that we've got an agenda, try to get minutes, but get an agenda at least for our next overall Reform Commission meeting in September. I'll set aside some time for the BOJ presentation from CSG. And we'll go from there. All right. Appreciate everybody's time, and have a good rest of your week, and we'll be in touch. I'm sure we'll see much of each other in subcommittee meetings before the next larger commission meeting. So thank you all for your time. We'll be in recess. Actually, to be clear, we will close the meeting. Recess, I think, is actually a formal term of art in these meetings. I don't want to violate COMA by using too much docket language from a courtroom. We are closing the meeting for the day. Thank you.